For millions of Americans, The Andy Griffith Show remains an unforgettable memory. It depicted the town of Mayberry, a place so peaceful it felt almost unreal, where the sheriff didn't carry a gun, and the biggest concern was simply who would bring the cake to the church social. But hidden behind the frames are details we never would have expected. An early-era trap girl with beauty reminiscent of Vivien Leigh. A grumpy husband who is in fact the future winner of 3 Oscars. A world-weary shopkeeper who became a global acting icon. When they first set foot in Mayberry, many were still complete unknowns. Here are 20 faces you might have missed in the Andy Griffith Show legends who visited this small town before their names burned bright on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. 20. Jack Nicholson, the greatest actor to ever visit Mayberry.
Mr. Jenkins, you said the door was open. Yes, sir. Mr. Jenkins, may I suggest to you that the door was not open?
This is the name that rightfully claims the top spot Jack Nicholson winner of 3 Academy Awards and one of the most legendary monsters in cinematic history, actually appeared on The Andy Griffith Show not once but twice. In November 1966, he appeared in the episode Opie Finds a Baby as Mr. Garland. The story begins when Opie and his friend Arnold stumble upon an abandoned infant. While the two are scrambling to figure out what to do, the child's parents finally show up. It is in that moment that Nicholson's unmistakable voice rings out. "My wife made a terrible mistake." A year later, Nicholson returned as Marvin Jenkins, a man accused of stealing a television. After an investigation, Marvin is cleared of all charges and the real culprit is revealed to be another thief. Do you remember that final moment when Marvin thanks Aunt Bee? That wasn't just a guest appearance, it was the image of a genius living inside a character. 19. Harry Dean Stanton, the most sorrowful face in the world. If you've seen Paris, Texas, or Pretty in Pink, you understand why Harry Dean Stanton is one of America's greatest character actors. With a gaunt face and eyes harboring a chronic sadness, as if bearing the world's entire weight. Stanton brought an instant haunting depth to every frame he occupied. But let's rewind to Mayberry. In one episode, Stanton played a small shop owner on a Caribbean island. He was exactly as we'd imagine his expression, so bleak and weathered. It looked as though he'd endured 10 lifetimes of misfortune. Few could have guessed that this was the period where Stanton was quietly honing his craft, long before he would truly haunt our souls in the masterpieces of Wim Wenders and David Lynch. 18. James Best from guitarist to sheriff. James Best visited Mayberry not just once, but twice. He was Jim Lindsay, the young guitarist, carrying dreams of a glamorous, brilliant career. Through the 2 episodes, The Guitar Player and The Guitar Player Returns, the audience witnessed a portrait of a talented soul struggling at the crossroads of life. But then James Best's career took an unexpected turn into a completely different chapter. Leaving behind the image of the wandering artist he shot to stardom in The Dukes of Hazzard as Roscoe P. Coltrane, one of the funniest villains in American TV history. The sheriff relentlessly chased the Duke boys across every road in Hazard County, only to, well, never actually catch anyone. 17. Bob Denver and Alan Hale Jr., Gilligan and the Skipper. Both stayed in Mayberry.
Yonder stands my own true love, reckon how I know. Both her eyes do shine for me, clear as morning glow.
Now, let's move to the duo stranded on a desert island, Skipper and Gilligan. Few realize that before they stepped onto that fateful ship with 5 other guests, they had a reunion full of destiny in Mayberry. Remember Dudwash, the clumsy guy who messed up everything he touched. In reality, CBS was incredibly clever to have Bob Denver appear on the show as a brilliant soft launch before he officially transformed into his legendary character on Gilligan's Island, 1964. Meanwhile, Alan Hale Jr., the venerable skipper, also stopped by Mayberry in the episode The Farmer Takes a Wife. He played Big Jeff Pruitt, a giant farmer with intentions to woo Thelma Lou Barney Fife's girlfriend. The moment the two of them faced off was truly a classic piece of comedy that left us laughing uncontrollably. 16. Morgan Brittany, from Trap Girl to Hollywood's enchanting legend. In 1967, all of America watched with bated breath as young Opie took his first steps toward the threshold of love on The Andy Griffith Show. However, Mary Alice Carter, played by Morgan Brittany, wasn't the gentle muse one might expect. She was Opie's first heartbreak, coldly rejecting his date to run off with another boy. And you'll likely agree with me on this, she bore a striking resemblance to Vivian Lee. That similarity wasn't just a coincidence. In fact, Morgan Brittany was cast to portray the silver screen icon 3 separate times in various projects Gable and Lombard: The Day of the Locust and the Scarlett O'Hara War. It was that sharp, sophisticated beauty that allowed her to successfully shed her child actor image, transforming into one of Hollywood's most mesmerizing and glamorous icons. 15. Howard Hesseman, the hot dog vendor in Citizen Harry. Do you remember the hot dog vendor in the episode Goober Goes to an Auto Show from the Andy Griffith Show? That very character, performing under the modest stage name Don Sturdy, later molted into Dr. Johnny Fever. He became the washed-up rock and roll DJ with a half-awake, half-dreaming swagger and that classic declaration, "I'm Dr. Johnny Fever and I'm gonna burn this place down." But before all that, in the world of the Andy Griffith Show, he appeared only in 2 minor roles. First was the hot dog seller in Goober Goes to an Auto Show, and later he transformed into Citizen Harry in the episode Sam for Town Council. With his natural and free-spirited acting style, Hesseman became a brilliant icon of the counterculture movement and the freeform radio wave. Honestly, when I heard the news of his passing, I ran outside and screamed, "Booger!" just to honor his memory. 14. Jamie Farr, playing a gypsy before wearing dresses in Korea. The world knows Jamie Farr as Corporal Klinger in MASH. The guy who constantly donned flamboyant dresses in a desperate attempt to get a Section 8 discharge, though nobody would ever let him go home. He remains one of the most beloved characters in American television history. However, before finding fame with MASH, Jamie Farr paid a visit to Mayberry in the episode The Gypsies as a man named Grekos. And of course, there wasn't a single princess dress to be found here. Jamie Farr appeared with thick black hair, rugged attire, and a nomadic flair. The arrival of Grekos and his family sent Mayberry into a frenzy as they staged a theatrical scam involving rainmaking and controlling the thunder. Watching this role, I had to wonder, did Grekos ever dream that one day he'd be strolling around an army camp in a gown? I think not. 13. Barbara Eden, the glamorous manicurist of Mayberry. I bet you'll recognize this girl instantly. Back in 1962 in the episode The Manicurist, Barbara Eden appeared as Ellen Brown, a beautiful manicurist who had just set foot in Mayberry. And immediately the peaceful town was turned upside down. Every time Ellen Brown hit the streets, the men of the town, from Sheriff Andy Taylor and the barber to the local residents, completely forgot what they were doing. Floyd nearly snipped off a customer's ear because he was so distracted, while Andy Taylor, usually famous for his composure, couldn't maintain his usual focus either. The funniest part is this: whether she was a manicurist or a genie in I Dream of Jeannie Barbara, Eden always possessed the superpower to leave men frozen in their tracks. 12. Lee Van Cleef, the purse snatcher in Mayberry. When you mention Lee Van Cleef, people immediately think of Sergio Leone's spaghetti westerns, especially The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, where he faced off against Clint Eastwood in a standoff that became cinematic history. And, the type Lee Van Cleef is the kind of man where one look into his eyes tells you everything, don't mess with him. Yet, before he struck terror into hearts as Angel Eyes, he visited the peaceful town of Mayberry in a role that was surprisingly modest: Skip, a member of a criminal gang. This also happened to be the episode that closed the black and white era of the Andy Griffith Show. And Lee Van Cleef showcased his incredible forte as he attempted to pull off a purse snatching. 11. Jack Albertson, Aunt Bee's millionaire phony cousin. Now let's move on to a true blowhard. Jack Albertson, the Oscar-winning actor, guest starred in the episode Aunt Bee's Cousin as Bradford J. Taylor, Aunt Bee's phony millionaire cousin. Bradford painted himself as a successful, wealthy, and powerful gentleman. In reality, behind that flashy exterior was nothing but a braggart. While Aunt Bee was bursting with pride over her talented cousin, Andy Taylor, using his sharp intuition, saw through the charade from the very first moment. It truly was a charming performance. And it served as the perfect preamble to the style Jack Albertson would later master in Chico and The Man, where his role as Ed Brown earned him yet another Emmy. 10. George Kennedy, the detective wrongfully arrested by his own kind. A detective getting busted by his own colleagues. It sounds like a joke, but it actually happened. In the episode The Big House, George Kennedy plays a highly diligent state police detective. He arrives in Mayberry to carry out his mission, but in a twist of irony, his rugged, tough guy appearance and secretive movements lead to him being arrested by mistake. The result was a riotous scene for the audience, watching a genuine detective fall into a helpless predicament, sitting behind bars and being interrogated like a common criminal. Interestingly, this same actor went on to win an Oscar in 1968 for his role as Dragline in Cool Hand, Luke Paul Newman's loyal prison mate. Beyond his on-screen brilliance, George Kennedy also shared a passion for sleuthing in real life, having authored 2 novels, Murder on Location, 1983, and Murder on High, 1984. 9. Teri Garr, the girl in the red convertible. In the episode The Wedding, Teri Garr appears in a role that was barely a name in the script, Girl in Red Convertible. It's a scene where Goober's looking for a date to a party and Teri Garr drives past. It's a very brief moment, but enough to remind us just how stunning she was. Coincidentally, during this time, 1968, Teri Garr met Jack Nicholson in an acting class. Nicholson later wrote the screenplay for the Monkees film Head and gave her a small part. Just a few years later, the world would marvel at her breakout performance in Young Frankenstein and the massive success of Tootsie, which brought her to the doorstep of the Oscars. But life wasn't all glitz and glamour. Behind the screen, she fought a long battle with multiple sclerosis. On October 29th, 2024, the girl in the convertible took her final journey at the age of 79. Rest in peace, Teri. 8. Jackie Coogan from Small Town Swindler to Uncle Fester. Jackie Coogan is a truly extraordinary figure. He was one of Hollywood's first child superstars and famously starred alongside Charlie Chaplin. However, his life story is as thrilling as it is heartbreaking. He earned millions as a child, only to have his fortune squandered by his own parents. That tragedy directly led to the birth of the Coogan Act, which protects the earnings of child actors in the U.S. to this day. In The Andy Griffith Show, he portrayed George Stevens, a seasoned swindler in the episode Barney on the Rebound. While there aren't many recorded details about this character, one thing is certain: Barney Fife handled him in his own trademark style. And do you remember Uncle Fester from the Addams Family? The hilarious uncle with the sunken eyes who could light up a light bulb in his mouth. Coogan donned heavy, pale makeup to take on that role. The result, an immortal character was born. 7. William Christopher Father Mulcahy of MASH. Remember this guy, Father Mulcahy from MASH? The gentle, kind-hearted priest who was always there to comfort weary soldiers amidst the Korean War. But few know that before that he appeared on The Andy Griffith Show twice. Once as Dr. Peterson in the episode A New Doctor in Town, and another time as a tax auditor named Heathcote in Aunt B on TV. Despite being associated with an intellectual image in real life, William Christopher was a direct descendant of Paul Revere, an American national hero. Additionally, he had a fierce passion for astronomy and parenting. You can see glimpses of this in his work, where he occasionally displayed his deep personal insights. 6. Jerry Van Dyke, the man who almost became the next Barney Fife. This is one of the most fascinating what-if stories of The Andy Griffith Show. Jerry Van Dyke appeared in the episode Banjo-Playing Deputy as Jerry Miller, a clumsy banjo-strumming deputy. He played the instrument for real, was incredibly awkward, and delivered an endearingly hilarious performance. But hidden behind that act is a fact few people know: Jerry Van Dyke was actually considered to replace Don Knotts when Knotts left the show. Just imagine. Instead of the legendary Barney Fife, we would have had another deputy constantly on standby with a banjo in his hands. Honestly, even I can't quite wrap my head around that scenario. Though that destiny didn't manifest, Jerry Van Dyke later achieved massive success with Coach, one of the most popular television series in America. 5. Kent McCord, an unnamed role in a judo dojo. If you're a fan of the police series Adam 12, you'll instantly recognize Officer Jim Reed, the young, serious partner of Officer Malloy. Kent McCord played that role for 7 seasons and became an iconic face of the police procedural genre. But before donning the uniform, McCord had a start so quiet it was almost invisible. Did you spot his face in the episode The Gypsies? At the judo dojo, McCord simply stood there as an extra among those in martial arts gear. Interestingly, it was that very serious look that caught the eye of the legendary Jack Webb. Webb saw a special quality in McCord, leading to his casting in the series Dragnet, before officially tailor-making the career-defining role for him in Adam 12. 4. Sterling Holloway, a voice that sounds familiar. When you hear this voice, I guarantee you'll remember exactly who he is. Sterling Holloway was the voice of Winnie the Pooh in Disney's animated masterpieces throughout the 60s and 70s. He also voiced Kaa the Python in The Jungle Book and the Cheshire Cat in Alice in Wonderland. However, before becoming the voice of the world's most famous stuffed bear, Sterling Holloway appeared in Mayberry as a weary traveling salesman, carrying a suitcase cluttered with goods as he knocked on doors. And did you notice, even when he was just selling wares, he looked remarkably trustworthy? He simply knocked on doors looking so tired and sincere that Sheriff Andy Taylor couldn't bear to let him keep wandering. Andy and Barney even stepped in to help Bert set up a small stand directly challenging the monopoly of old man Ben Weaver. In the end, after days of roaming, Bert finally found himself a stable place to call home. 3. Bill Bixby, the spoiled brat, before becoming the Incredible Hulk. Before transforming into a ferocious green giant, Bill Bixby was a young master who drove the entire town of Mayberry crazy. In the 1962 classic episode Bailey's Bad Boy, a convertible roars madly through the streets before slamming into a vegetable truck. Stepping out from the wreckage is Ronald Bailey, the privileged son of a powerful family, a man who believes money can buy forgiveness for anything. But few realize that when he took this role, Bill Bixby was already 28 years old. After shedding his spoiled brat persona, Bixby moved through a series of roles in My Favorite Martian and The Courtship of Eddie's Father. However, television history truly etched his name only when he stepped into the laboratory as Dr. David Banner. And from there, whenever he got angry, a legend began. 2. The Howard Family. When the whole family stars in one show. This is the most special entry on the list because it is the story of an entire family. Ron Howard played Opie Taylor, Sheriff Andy's son, throughout the show's entire run. He truly grew up on screen, transitioning from a small redheaded boy into a teenager. Later, Ron Howard became the world-renowned director behind masterpieces like Apollo 13, A Beautiful Mind, The Da Vinci Code, and countless other classics. Yet few know that Ron's father, Rance Howard, also appeared in several episodes. And Clint Howard. He appeared in over 5 episodes as Leon. Without needing long lines of dialogue, Leon became one of Mayberry's most beloved recurring characters, armed only with a sandwich in his hand and a trademark gaze. 1. Gavin MacLeod, from bank robber to loveboat captain. Gavin MacLeod, the man the world would later recognize as Captain Merrill Steubing in the Love Boat, actually visited Mayberry. And both times he left an impression that was incredibly awkward. The first time MacLeod portrayed a fast-talking bank robber in the episode Crime-Free Mayberry. He was the type of villain who talked more than he acted, overconfident to a fault, only to be rounded up by the duo of Barney Fife and Andy Taylor in the most convincing fashion. The second time, a delightful meta moment in the episode Taylor's in Hollywood. When a Hollywood film crew wants to recreate life in Mayberry, MacLeod is cast to play the movie version of Sheriff Taylor. Just imagine Gavin MacLeod playing a Hollywoodized version of the very character Andy Griffith is playing right next to him. It was a subtle and hilarious layer of storytelling. Jack Nicholson would later proudly hold an Oscar. George Kennedy would shine in Cool Hand Luke. Lee Van Cleef would stare down Clint Eastwood in one of the most iconic duels in cinematic history. Barbara Eden would step out of a magic bottle. Sterling Holloway would breathe life into the voice of Winnie the Pooh. And Jamie Farr would roam the barracks in colorful dresses and MASH. But before reaching those monumental milestones, they all set foot in a small town called Mayberry. They appeared, delivered a few lines, and quietly moved on with their journeys. Out of these 20 names, who surprised you the most? Leave a comment below. I'm truly curious to know which hidden guest in Mayberry caught you off guard. And if you love stories like these, hit the subscribe button to stay tuned for the next videos.